Hey, good evening to you. Cole Munson here from Expats Portugal. And it's, of course, our Feelgood Portugal evening, a second of these shows on a Saturday night from 10 o'clock Portugal time. And it's lovely to be in your company. And do feel free to just sit back in the chair, take it easy. It's a very different sort of atmosphere to our morning shows and our webinars. I mean, some of the themes are there of our open-hearted, open-minded approach to things and upbeat and positive. Certainly that's a hallmark of what we're doing. But, here on a Saturday night, as we reach out across the world, let's focus on the things that help us to feel good and minimize unhappiness. And we've got a great guest for you tonight, Mr. Jim White, who's a regular on the morning show. And I feel a great part of our community. He is the bringer of good news in his own right in just these last few days. And I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with him in the first hour. He may, of course, stay with us for the whole show. Mrs. M and I will be here for the next couple of hours. And you will see on the right of the screen, certainly it's on my right of the screen as I'm looking at it, Feel Good Portugal, staying positive and healthy in challenging times. And that should be Mrs. M sat in that chair. The black shape you can see there is the chair, the office chair that she will find herself glamorous and resplendent in, I'm sure, quite soon as the noises of the household, of our busy household, subside and she's able to join us fully. But here and waiting in the green room and live from Baltimore in the USA tonight is our dear friend Jim White. So let's bring him onto the screen. Good evening to you, Jim.
Good evening. It's really good to be here. Nice to see you and continue on our conversations that we all have in the morning. So thank you for having me here.
Well, it's a pleasure, Jim, because I know that you have a commitment to personal development, to human potential of many years, and you're on your way to Portugal. The good news I was referring to just now was that you've heard good news.
I have. For those of you in the U.S. looking to come to Portugal, you know the value of a D7 visa. Well, ours came through yesterday. So this morning I'm at FedEx sending it off to the embassy so they can stamp it and send it back. And now the work begins of selling the house and moving. But it's all a part of the transition. And so we're so excited about the possibilities.
Oh, well, congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll find out more about you tonight. This is a lovely moment to take it easy and talk to people from our community who maybe have something extra special to give to the whole Feel Good conversation. And you're certainly one of them. So we'll be doing that tonight, and you're at the intersection of people who are interested in coming to Portugal. The Feel Good Portugal show itself on a Saturday night, so you're the perfect guest in so many ways, Jim.
Oh, thank you.
It's like as well, you're on first name terms with the people at the FedEx office as well.
They are. That's right. It's on speed dial, and they're my best friends, BFFs.
Excellent, and I think we've sorted out the whole book issue that we talked about.
I hope so.
I'm looking forward to seeing your book soon, and that will certainly come into the conversation this evening. And also bringing into the conversation people who are tuned in this evening and already there in good numbers. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Patrick was here ages ago. I shall start, he says. Carl, you've inspired and taught me, and also the people on here. And I think educated me that the Portugal way is a great way to live a life. I'll put that to you in just a moment, Jim, and what attracted you to coming to Portugal. And I thank you, Carl. Thank you, Patrick. Really appreciate it. And I know you're a big fan of the Austins who joined me on Friday morning. It was lovely to talk to them live from Tamar. Jean's also here. Hello, Jean. From Westwood, New Jersey. Fantastic. Beautiful early autumn day here. What am I talking about? It's not evening yet there. Beautiful early autumn day here in the Northeast. Maybe one of my last by next year at this time. Portugal! So that's fantastic. Matty's here as well. Part of the wider community, I know, with a special interest in the feel-good aspects, the complementaries, the holistic and the positive. So great to have you here tonight, Matty, as well as Carlos Lima. Hello, Carlos. How are you? Lovely to receive your photos. John S. is here as well with a hi, Carl. And congratulations for you, Jim, on your D7 news.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
And from Matty as well. Congrats, Jim.
Thank you.
And a yay, a straightforward yay, which I'm sure is for you as well on your news too.
Mandy is my wife. Yeah, she's very happy too.
Mandy, good evening to you. How are you tonight? And Brad, dude, Jim's book is a great and is great and helpful for any organization. So we'll certainly find out more about your book.
Thanks, Brad.
Who's Brad, dude?
Brad and I, there's a story here that we could talk later on. Brad and I go back to the 70s, where we worked with the Peace Corps in Micronesia. And we lived on an island a mile long and half a mile wide and trained Peace Corps volunteers. And so we've known each other since then. So
how lovely, yeah. And going back to the 70s, as you put it there, it will be great to have your sense of the your chronological sense of how things have changed in the human potential movement.
Yeah.
So that'll be a lovely conversation tonight.
Right.
A book that came to mind. The word Aquarian came up in my mind as I was driving from one place to another this afternoon. And of course, The Aquarian Conspiracy by Marilyn Ferguson was a key book, wasn't it? I think late 70s, early 80s, possibly. And that and other such milestones, I'm sure, may well come into our conversation this evening as those kind of zeitgeist books.
Well, another one, just zeitgeist, is The Ugly American, which formed the basis for cross-cultural work in general and looking at the disconnects that folks can have when they move from one country to another. And
wow.
And it was the foundation actually that stimulated foreign policy and actually established in the U.S. Peace Corps volunteer program back in the 60s.
And that's when it came out, The Ugly American, in the 1960s?
In the 1960s.
Incredible. Thank you for that. Okay. And yes, folks who are tuned in, I mean, what were the books that made a big difference to your life? It might have been, something as recent as The Power of Now, possibly. It might have been Marilyn Ferguson's The Aquarian Conspiracy. It could have been The Ugly American that Jim has just mentioned there. But there are hundreds of other, what would be called, I suppose, self-help books that have made a big impact on people's lives. They may not have come to huge public attention, but I think they've changed the world. So if you've got one of those, do let us know. Cindy B. Botard from a short timer in Texas. Cindy, what do you mean a short time? Like fairly new to the community, or you're not going to be long in Texas? You're going to be back in Portugal. Let us know what you mean there. But it's great to have your company, Cindy B. Of course, the hostess of our living room on the forum there. So she's well worth getting to know. Is Cindy B. And we know of her great love of Portugal too. Margaret Katz is here. Hello, Jim, Maggie.
Hi, Maggie.
Would you say Berkshires there?
Yes, Berkshires.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic.
Not Berkshires. I mean, it's Berkshires.
Yes, well, I only ask because in the UK that would be Berkshire, Royal Berkshire as well.
Oh, okay.
Of course, yeah. No, I don't mean to be pedantic. I just didn't know which side of the Atlantic that was from. Butard tuning in as I'm feel good curious. Well, no judgment here. You're very welcome. I'll be Eusebio with Midlife Crisis World Tour. And actually, what a great subject to bring into the conversation as well, the whole idea of a midlife crisis. I think I had my first one in my 20s. Eusebio, when did you have your first midlife crisis? Hello and congratulations from your friends Paul and Gloria. How do I say this, Jim?
Oaxaca.
Great.
The O takes a W. Oaxaca.
It's funny that it's something it's a spirit of my father in the room, because he used to say that, Oaxaca, and I had no idea that it was spelled like that. So good evening to you, Gloria. Lovely to hear from you and from Paul in Oaxaca. I'll say it again, and now I know what to say. Mrs. M with the kids, everything all right? Absolutely. Yeah, the empty chair does look a bit ominous, doesn't it? But she will be with us presently. And we met a dear friend in a restaurant last night who came over. He was in Portugal. Actually, he's in the book business, and we talked about the Mind, Body, Spirit books actually that he's worked with quite a lot. He's in Portugal, and Mrs. M was joining us, and the waiter got quite concerned. Is she coming yet? Do you want to order? And, it's a lady's prerogative to arrive when she wants to. So that's exactly what she's going to do tonight as well. Mark, good evening. Hello, Mark, in Norfolk in the UK. Oh, so many people saying hello to us tonight, Jim. Nubianet, hello. I'll have to catch the replay. I'm so interested, but I'm meeting a friend for lunch. Thanks for sharing in advance. No problem, Nubianet. I'm sure you'll find Jim's story and input tonight very fascinating. So do make sure you catch the replay and have a lovely lunch. Not long in Texas. Okay. Yes, it's Cindy B. And hopefully not too long there, and you'll be back soon. Good evening, everyone from Germany tonight, Jim. Look at that. Chris Robinson in Germany. And Amsterdam as well. Look, we've got a great international audience.
Fantastic.
San is here, evening from Amsterdam. Jersey P over there in the States. Butard, Carl, and Jim. Fox San waving. Can you see? I'm in Amsterdam as well. Look at that. And Mandy, Mandy, wife Mandy saying hi to Gloria and Paul in Oaxaca. And Marianne A, greetings to all from Miami Beach. Enjoy your show every morning, Carl. Well, that's very kind, Marianne. Really appreciate that. Jim, of course, a part of that. And Jim's effort is legendary. What time is it when you tune in on, for the morning show, Jim?
Now it's 3:30 in the morning. 3:30
a.m.
That's all. That's all. It's a good time to get up and then go right back to sleep. I think
unbelievable. I appreciate it. That is above and beyond. Evening from evening all from Suffolk in the UK. Bearders22. Hey, Bearders22. Nice to see you here this evening. Marie Bridge is here as well. Hello from Rhode Island here in the States. Jim and I both lived in the Marshall Islands for the Peace Corps. I read The Ugly American before going in the Peace Corps, and it had a huge impact. I'm so embarrassed to say I've never heard of that book, but I already get its impact and its power. We love Mosteiros in the Azores and go every year. Fantastic, Margaret.
Wow.
Great. The Azores, amazing, hey? Andrea Hogan, Oka, Bonoit, how was your day? Next plans? Is Andrea here as well, I wonder? Did I miss your comment? I'm in New Zealand, says Denny Jennings. What a fantastic spread we've got this evening from around the world. I just got my world map up behind me. I thought it made a nicer backdrop. It didn't look like I was making a hostage video like last week. Good evening from Obidosh, Jackie Brooks. Congratulations on your D7, Jim. So for the time being,
thank you.
Yeah, another congratulations there. So let's find out more about Jim. The work you do, the book you've written, Jim. Please tell us about yourself.
Well, I have been working recently. Well, I began this work in sort of the heart, mind, body things when I got started in the Peace Corps many years ago, although we didn't have a lot of heart attached to it other than what we were thinking we were doing. I spent a number of years doing Peace Corps work, working with volunteers going overseas. And I'll tell you, this leads up to how I got into what I'm doing now. I then began to work a lot when doing leadership workshops in various organizations and looking to figure out a way to strengthen and deepen what goes on. What do you do? How do you teach them? Do you put PowerPoints or whatever? All of that kind of stuff. Yeah. In the late 80s, I was teaching. In the mid 80s, I was teaching a workshop in Singapore and had a heart attack. And I had been burning the candle at both ends, working very hard, very type A kind of stuff, overseas, etc. Had a heart attack, went into the hospital. Long story short, I came back to the U.S., had open heart surgery in the U.S. and realized, and I was also in therapy at the time. This does lead someplace. I was in therapy at that time and realized that because of the way I was living, I was breaking my own heart. Wow. And as I began to realize that, I began to discover something deeper, which is a mind-body connection, and how we think about things and how we talk to ourselves, and all of those kinds of things really do matter. And began to explore the relationship between how we think and stand and be, and what we say and how we interact, and how that impacts our health and our mental health as well as our physical health. So I got enamored of that.
Yes.
And then from there, ties in with the book. I began working with a team of people at a yoga and spiritual retreat center in the Berkshires near Maggie. We began, which is a place where we would train facilitators, folks who would like to facilitate personal growth through taking their work in the world out. And how do you structure taking your heartfelt work out into the community and into the world? So how do you design it, structure it, teach it, provide activities, etc.? So that was our work. And this book is the results of about 20 years worth of effort as two of the members of the team, and about another aggregate 10 years of collective effort for 3 or 4 more of us. And so we have a book called Designing and Leading Life-Changing Workshops, which is a manual, a how-to that touches on mind, body, spirit, how you integrate that into learning, how do you set up activities so that you can actually touch people at a deeper level, and people can say, aha, oh, maybe that's possible.
Yes.
So it's working in the realm of how to help people work in the domain of realizing what's possible for them and then getting into action to do that. So that's what the long story from the heart attack.
Well, yes, it is, and so interesting. The whole physiological reference point there, and I think the phrase you use of breaking your own heart. Well, as in, I mean, Carly Simon famously said, didn't she, in that one of her tunes that she wrote? I don't know if she wrote it, but she certainly performed it. Don't mind if I fall apart. There's more room in a broken heart. Is that something of what went on for you? That the breaking open was a transformational moment.
It was. Yes. It's going from being a broken heart to becoming open-hearted.
Wow.
And that was, and that led me into exploring more on neuroscience as it relates to mind-body stuff, and relating the neuroscience and the quantum physics side of the way the world works to what's going on inside of us and what you do in workshops. And realizing that a lot of the stuff that's 5,000 years old in practice, actually now it's okay to do because science says it's okay to meditate, or it's okay to do Tai Chi, or all of that, that's legitimizing for some folks the opportunity to open up to different experiences.
Amazing. So, okay, I was going to ask you how things have changed then in your. I mean, it sounds like you had a sort of corporate beginning.
Yes.
And then in Singapore, so there was a time in the corporate time when you weren't that aware of the heart-based work. Exactly. Then 20 years ago it started.
Yes.
And now, is that right? 20 years ago, and now 20 years later, the world's a very different place, isn't it? But before we go there, before we go to that change of 20 years, let's pick up on that 5,000 year, the legitimization of 5,000-year-old insight. What did you mean by that? What's that background there?
The background there is that if we look at, in the mind-body community, the somatic community, the spiritual community that does introspective things and contemplative things as a part of their practices. Yoga 15 to 20 years ago was kind of woo-woo and touchy-feely.
Yes.
Meditation was the folks that kind of looked like Hare Krishna guys on the corner with their beads and bangles and cups.
Yeah.
And it has come full circle with many years now worth of research in the positive benefits of yoga, as was described 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Science is sort of saying this is how it works and this is what's going on. And there are some movements in neuroscience where they're taking long-term meditators from Tibet, putting these things on their head and watching what goes on in their brain as they meditate, and then looking at the changes there. So there's a legitimization of the old touchy-feely, woo-woo 60s hippie way of seeing the world. Yeah. Into it's really becoming quite mainstream and quite accepted in all kind of all disciplines, actually, that there is a real connection. For example, if you we'll just take an example of how that feels. So when we're let's say what's a good example, okay, of how that might feel, of this mind-body connection. You're sitting in a meeting. Those of you that have been in corporate situations have been in meetings, and you're sitting around and people are having a perfectly nice conversation. It's going along, and somebody walks in the room, and the energy goes flat. Ever happened? Yes. Energy just goes flat. Now, hopefully, it's not you walking in the room that creates the flatness.
You're just thinking that.
It's not you. It's not you. And so what has gone on is that biologically and neurobiologically, there's an idea called emotional contagion. And the fact is that we are contagious with each other, and when we come in the room with each other. And that sounds woo-woo, except there's a lot of research around it. So when that person walked in the room, we got something in our bodies when they walked in the room. They didn't have to say anything. They didn't have to even have a scowl on their face. It's, used to call it mind-body, but it's much more than just body language. It's a whole series of things, and we get it. And all of that kind of stuff is being legitimized and researched now, which is I just love that stuff. Yeah.
Well, and a very interesting thing for me with what you've just said is what happened, because we know it. When you've explained it like that, and when science backs it up, we can say, yeah, of course, that guy always does that. Whatever.
That's
you
right.
know, I think we've all been that guy, haven't we? We're not sort of singling anybody out. At some point, we've all been that guy.
Not in the last 20 years. No, certainly not.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
So,
Hopefully not.
but we recognise it, don't we? We recognise it. And as kids, we knew that when our parents were having a bad day, it kind of the contagion was often there, wasn't it? Unless they were extremely adept meditators or transformational beings, which
right.
you know, let's face it, not all of us are. And I would love a cup of tea. Thank you very much. So I'm getting a tea sign from off camera there. Mrs. M will be with us shortly. It's not all glamour for Mrs. M. She's making tea as well behind the scenes. But okay, all right. So she'll be with us soon, everybody. So we recognise these things, don't we? And John is making a very. I mean, this extends to plants as well, doesn't it? With the studies that have been done recently. Carl, there was a study on the effects on plants of good words and bad words all day. One group said all day. One group said only good things and the other bad, and the effects were quite shocking. And he goes on to say the plants where the people said good words did well, and the plants that died where the bad words were said. And we can, you know, it's all very well with plants, but I think people can relate to that. So at some point, we must have shut off to that power. Was it the Industrial Revolution? What happened in this 5,000 year cycle that you speak of, or 5,000 year span? We shut off to our fullness, didn't we, in our holistic selves? What do you think went on?
It's hard to tell. I think part of it was the Industrial Revolution, and part of it was the rise of the scientific method and looking to quantify things, only look at things that could be counted and touched and sorted as being real. And when you talk about changing of mood, and we'll talk a little bit later about how you craft your moods. But anyway, I think it had to do with how we sort what is legitimate information and what isn't. And if it's subjective, then that got ruled out as a scientific method became more embedded in the way we were, along with the revolution and along with other things. But it separated our way of thinking and feeling, or our way of feeling and reacting to what we thought it was. And that's a part, I think that builds too. And others in the audience may, have experience, of course, with it as well. It's
I'm sure. And we'll get some other theories, of course, as to what happened. And of course, I suppose that in its own way is a scientific inquiry. And what really matters is how we can get back to those faculties, right? And so if we go back to your, 20 years ago, what happened for you, and wait 20 years later, what might be happening in the world now? From the conversations we've had and from the comments you've made when you've been watching, I think you're pretty positive about the direction of travel with this, right?
I am. I'm positive because I think, because I'm enamored of the studies around this. I love it, and I'm not a scientist, but I'm geeky in that way. But what I'm seeing is that there are breakthroughs being made in the neuroscience area, interpersonal neurobiology, and even quantum physics in terms of how quantum physics relates to group dynamics. Lots of things that are going on that layer in a level of legitimacy that may open up consideration by those folks who would poo-poo it before. It's not a magic wand, because as we all know, you can deny science. Science is not the only argument. However, for some, it becomes an opportunity to say, okay, I can let go of that way of thinking that's not working. Maybe I'll just consider the possibility that this could make a difference in my life or how I operate with people. So that's why I'm hopeful about the evolution of the research that's being done. And the positivity of the people who are doing the research is contagious. And whether it's enough to turn around, what's going on in the world and how we're operating together, I don't know. But in terms of that stream or thread, it's encouraging.
Well, that's the other part of it. That I think what you're alluding to there is we need it. I think
we do.
We have a job to do, don't we? In perhaps reflecting on our results and some of the greatest, what might be called happiness of our times, is concentrated, arguably, in quite a small area of the world,
Yeah.
and in certain lives and lifestyles, and we could perhaps be doing a bit better. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's useful to be especially negative or critical without offering some sort of solutions. But
Yeah.
it would be hard to avoid that as that assessment in some way. That there is some work to do for us human beings to make things fairer, and the
Yeah.
reasons you were in the Peace Corps in the
That's,
first place. Those things persist, don't they? And I think
they do.
anyone with any concern about fellow human beings has quite a lot of work to go at if that is their concern, and if they're a compassionate being.
Exactly, and if they're compassionate and want to do something, there's some interesting research in neuroscience that can help us feel better about our attempts to try to be a better person or engage more effectively. And that the research shows that we have an inherent negativity bias.
Yeah.
Some say that we're hardwired for the negative 7 times more than we are for the positive.
Yes. Yes.
And that's a part of a brain function. It's called the default mode network, and it's a series of cluster of brains. And it puts us in the place of worrying about the future, regretting the past, comparing ourselves to each other, all of that kind of stuff. That chatter that goes on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we all have the same chatter patterns. They're just different by the things we talk about, but the patterns are the same. And so once we begin to, they are the same. You can be in New Guinea in the highlands of New Guinea herding your pigs, and you still have the same chatter going on in your brain.
As the guy driving a taxi in London.
Exactly. What's going to happen in the future? Will the wolves get my pigs? Or will I run into a tree? Same chatter. Knowing that there's this common human link between us all that can sometimes give us pause and have us think, maybe, just maybe, this person is not a jerk. They're just not, they're actually playing out what is natural for us to play out when we're not aware of these things that are going on, because that's a part of our automatic pilot. So it is hopeful because there's a lot of being done. And I know Louisa and you both work in this arena, but there's a lot to be done about how you change your mind and your attitude and your mindsets and how you stay with it. And so,
well, perhaps that's the most exciting part of the work then, because we are, more and more people, there is a school of thought. I think Jordan Peterson brings people to point on this and says, even though a lot of people think the world stinks right now, it's never been better in so many ways. And you could argue, and that's not for everybody, but for many people, it's got better. Do you want to live the lives of your grandparents? Well, in some ways, yes, I'd love to grow my own vegetables, but other things like medical developments and so many other lifestyle changes that we take for granted. We are so much better off than our grandparents and great grandparents were. There's no question about that. And you could say then, further to that if we've taken care of some of those things on the Maslow's hierarchy, we might start to attend to that very phenomenon you talked about, that although we might still be programmed and conditioned to worry, we might not do it so much. We might have an evolutionary breakthrough that puts that into a more constructive and useful perspective. Is there a sense of that at the moment?
I think so, and of course, I'm optimistic because I like to be more optimistic than pessimistic. It really feels a whole lot better inside to be optimistic because, when we're pessimistic, to be honest, it creates a serotonin and cortisol hit that builds up over time and can turn from kind of dissatisfaction to chronic, disdain. And that's not a healthy thing to be. But I do think that there are breakthroughs that people are making. And my bias is that many of those breakthroughs need to come from contemplative practices of some sort.
Right.
And awarenesses of when we go off the rails and being able to pull ourselves back a bit, not chastise ourselves for it, but sort of say, I did it again.
Yes.
How might I not do this the next time?
Yes. I mean, you might say that's what we're here for almost.
Yes.
Because we're given a new day every day if we're lucky, aren't we? In which we can practice. And I think hopefully that will be, a bit like talking to the plants. If we spoke to ourselves in a positive way. Well, I mean, to put this into a context, I heard of an amazing little quip. If you spoke to your friends the way you spoke to yourself, you probably wouldn't have any. And we are very harsh on ourselves. We're very hard on ourselves, aren't we?
Very
And I
hard.
think that's possibly a vestige of the scientific judgmental world, the old educational system that teaches
Yeah.
people to be right and correct and not wrong or defective. So we
Right.
then police ourselves in that way, don't we? By saying, "Oh, you're so silly. Why did I keep doing that?" And we find it very hard to forgive ourselves, I think.
It's very, very difficult. And that bouncing into attacking ourselves that way is a part of that network that is there, just embedded. And it's tailored by our experience, etc. But it's in there waiting to be claimed, as it were, unless we're aware. And then it is about becoming more and more aware of that going on. And it's not easy, and it's not a panacea, clearly, but it helps. It really helps.
Indeed. Oh, look.
Hello.
There is beauty on the screen.
That's right. Good
Hello.
evening.
Oh, well, she's just limbering up there. So we'll take a few comments while she's covering herself up with a blanket by the look of it, because it's getting a bit chillier. So for those of you who've watched our videos with expats everywhere, this is the time of year that Louisa spoke of that I just completely avoid and am in denial about. It's going a bit cooler and a bit damper now. So she's got her earmuffs on as well. No, we can't hear you. I think you might have to start up the soundboard. That's when I was setting it up for you. That's the one thing I didn't check, and it's the one thing that seems to have gone wrong. So we'll let you do that. Just keep going, love, and maybe I don't know, say a poem or something, and we'll begin. Start up the Tascam. Just click on that, and there she
go.
There she goes. She's with us now. Fantastic. I felt very responsible for that. Yes, we can hear that as well. We are testing the speakers on StreamYard. Thank you for that. So we'll come, Jim. I've been talking to Jim, who you can see here. Jim,
Hi,
Louisa, Jim.
Nice to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you. I have to admit, I was a little surprised to walk into the studio and actually find myself on the screen. I thought I'd add myself into the show. So, I wish I'd actually put some trousers on. I hope I didn't flash everyone with.
Yeah, you did, but it's a very unjudgmental sort of evening on the Saturday night.
That's right.
Did I hear you talking about sort of like gratitude about when we've been born? Like we've got it a bit easier than other generations, and what have I missed?
Well, I will give you, for anyone else who's joined, like Mrs. M, I'm going to attempt to give a potted history and to see how well I've been listening, Jim. And you as a facilitator, you can give me some feedback on my skills here. But, Jim was talking about this incredible experience he had of 20 years ago in a training situation, a heart attack in Singapore. And broke his own heart, I think was the phrase that was used, and opened up to the heart-centered transformational consciousness, and has been working in that area ever since, showing others how to share their work, how to share themselves, and to show up like that with others, with other people in the team, but for people to have that holistic awareness and sharing and perspective and context. And what an amazing gift that is to the rest of the world. Is that about right, Jim?
You got it. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Can I just repeat that again, just to make sure I got that clear? You had a heart attack whilst delivering training in Singapore.
Yes.
I mean, they're a tough crowd.
It was the reason that it was my, and I'll say it's my own fault. That's not very helpful to your psyche. But anyway, I was burning the candle at both ends. I was staying up late. I was on jet lag. And I went to sleep. I planned for the next day. I went to sleep. I woke up. I was going to get up at 4:30 and go back to work, and get ready.
Yeah.
And I woke up at 8:30, and the class started at 9. And I felt this pain in my chest.
Oh dear.
And I knew something was going on. I got out, put a note in my pocket saying, I work for a company called Westinghouse. Call Westinghouse and let them know I'm here. Anyway, long story short, I had open heart surgery and therapy going along in that time frame. Wow. And realized through the therapy and getting well better with the heart that what I was doing was metaphorically breaking my own heart by the way I was dealing with my emotions and dealing with the stresses and not taking care of myself and thinking I could be Superman and all things to all people and all of that, and it caught up with me. And so that's what triggered a different way of trying to show up.
Wow.
Incredible, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's hardcore training.
Yes.
And
It is hardcore. It really
And
is.
There are easier ways, I
Also,
think,
I
to
mean,
open up to transformational
There is.
possibility now, aren't
Yeah,
there?
there are.
I don't recommend it.
I mean, it's like taking heaven by storm. Like
Yeah.
you
Yes.
have
Yeah.
no choice but to transform, and it happened in a very public way as well, because you know, you didn't like slope off and have a heart attack.
No.
Wow.
No, I just didn't show up for class that morning. That's a pretty public way of, the class was started and I had a heart attack. I was in the hospital when class started. So that's a very public way of not showing up. So
That's it's a kind of acceptable way. I once missed a training course because I was drunk in bed.
There's really no comparison. There is no comparison. How dare you?
Many ways to do it.
I was so ashamed of myself.
Was that a turning point though? I hope it was. Or did you carry on like that for several years more?
That was definitely a turning point, you know, not showing up because and it possibly for similar reasons. You know, I'd been burning the candle at both ends, and I really needed to break the pattern. You know, I was really worn out, got very, very drunk very quickly, and didn't have the foresight to set my alarm or, you know, look after myself. It was a cry for help, if anything. And after that, I felt deeply shocked because I'd put my career in you know, under massive stress.
Sure,
It's JP Morgan Chase, not a good look. But
No,
I mean,
well, that's very good. I mean, Jim has
a lot more dramatic, you know.
I think Jim has brought an atmosphere of openness and transformation. Because I've never heard that story, Jim. So clearly, your presence has brought that forth as a confession of some sort.
All of these things are like a pebble in a pond. You never know where they're going to go. That's right.
So
I mean, that's one of my deepest shames is not showing up, actually. So that's probably why I haven't told you.
Well, we were also talking about how we give ourselves a hard time. I mean, there are certainly worse things in the world. And I'll tell you what, there are many people who go to training sessions who wish their facilitator was still drunk in bed. Aren't there? Let's face it.
That's true.
Yes. I quite often check in on you guys, and I'm sure that's in a good way. Denny Jennings. I'm an O'Neill. So have ties to. What does that mean, Denny? What are the O'Neills big in or is it O'Neill the brand? What's that mean, Denny? Tell us more. Ubi is here as well. Bon dia todos. Hello, Ubi. Great to have you here. Matty, so no, in the right channel, can see the right chat. I think that's a conversation between him and Andrea, who we're delighted to have here as well. But night from Anna da Silva. Hey, Anna, transformative learning at its finest. That was going back to your earlier comments there from Cindy B towards you, Jim, there. And John S., thank you for that. That was the plants and the Emoto experiments as well, right? With I think rice was used, wasn't it? With Mr. Emoto, the Japanese researcher,
and water as well with Emoto. I think it did the what the bleep do we know world.
Yes, indeed. Well, there's another. We were talking also, Louisa, about books that have changed people's lives. I was saying to Jim as I was driving along today around the Silver Coast. The word Aquarian came to mind, as a description of people, and the Aquarian conspiracy. I think I bought you that book as a bit of a classic. You know, I mean, you know, decades after it had been first published, and Jim and I were talking about books that have changed people's lives. Jim mentioned The Ugly American, which I'd not heard of, but it inspired him and his work in the Peace Corps. Andrea, Healthy Move Portugal. I could not see your comment. Come on, Andrea, Matty, sort it out. It's because Carl is streaming the show on 2 channels, more than I think. Oh, I see. Yes, so you can't see each other on YouTube. Yes, there's the plant experiment. So we are. Thank you for that, Matty. We are on Expats Portugal. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and listened after the show last week. All hundreds of you now, which is great. We really appreciate that. And also on Feelgood Portugal as well. And in case you're wondering what happened to Spiritual Portugal, this is it. It's called Feelgood Portugal now. So that we don't have to be concerned with a slightly awkward push button word that spiritual can be sometimes. Glad to see you now,
really?
Matty. We drove. That's another thing for the conversation tonight, isn't it? How things have changed with the messaging and the language. So they're the Andrew and Tonk have come from the Netherlands, and we drove south, some towards Spain. The town is Terugem, near Elvas. We will be exploring tomorrow. Now I hear, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that Elvas, despite what people say isn't quite, it's a thriving place. In fact, Elvas isn't dead. Usually if your boss walks in when the employees talk about their spare time, what's that? Is that a training experience? I wonder.
I think that's in response to, have you ever been in a meeting where it's going well and somebody walks in and the energy just sinks?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the heart sink moments. That's the one. Bearders, so agree with you, Jim. It'll be my 10 years next week since I had my heart attack. I retired at 56. And it must be a coincidence, but my blood pressure came down. Work can be dangerous for your health. So key message for everyone tonight. Remember that. Elvish is looking amazing. And Fiona and Simon here. Always lovely to have your company, folks. Benoit, nice to meet you, Jim.
Nice to meet you, Fiona.
There is also research on gut health and your mental health. Well, I think Mrs. M will tackle that this evening, I'm sure. Those with does it mean that if you've got a big gut, you've got sort of a big brain then, or a lot of intellectual capacity?
Not necessarily. It could mean
I wish.
Okay, yes. All right. Those with the
Start the rumor.
It's all those geniuses who play darts. Those with a balanced gut have better mentality, and those who are out of balance have issues with the balance. Well, they found this, haven't they? With I think with criminals. I worked with a very enlightened, a retired police officer, a senior police officer in the United Kingdom, and he did a master's in nutrition, and particularly how many criminals that he had researched had an upset gut biome. You know, they were driven by their guts, as all of us are, of course. And there was a connection to be made. Whether or not he had any luck with the Home Secretary in the UK pushing that forward, I don't know. But it's kind of obvious, isn't it? Mrs. M, I think you probably want to address that.
Well, I just I've read a little bit about fecal transplants, and
oh no,
where somebody who's got a very good, well-functioning gut passes a little bit of a stool, and it gets kind of mixed in with some kind of I don't know how they transplant it. I know it goes in orally, and people with awful guts can have their kind of biome re-established, and their mental health improves.
But bad apple sort of stuff.
It sounds a bit horrible, you know. It sounds a bit icky, you know. It's not.
I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going to be doing that anytime soon.
But I mean, if we knew that worked, then we could actually, you know, how people talk about. Well, there's rumors that people might have organs regrowing and things like that in different labs, you know, that you could regenerate part of your organ, or you might have matching donors or whatever. Or there's all sorts of talk about clones and things on the dark web. But I mean, if you had a really good biome in your stomach, you could potentially like either get a homeopathic remedy based on the vibration of it, or you could actually like store your biome, like
or become a donor. Yes, become a donor. Because with sperm donations, it was thought, wasn't it? You know, you want to find out where this is coming from, so to speak, and you know, pick someone of good stock. And the same would be true, I suppose, of the fecal transplants you're talking of, which I never imagined I'd ever be speaking about in this
really?
context. Yeah, really.
But you know what?
It wasn't on the agenda tonight.
It wasn't, Jim, was it?
You know what? I feel like I've come in and hijacked this. I'd really love to hear about Jim's recovery. You know, like it's a pretty big thing, and heart attacks have come up, and heart issues have come up in some of the interviews I've been doing with, and I know you've listened to them, you know, with Jeff Granville, who talks about like the trauma and body armoring that happens when we have operations and have a part of us fiddled with and whatnot. And he's spent a lot of time in hospitals helping people to like release the trauma of the sites where you've had difficulty. And then obviously Robert Jardine, who's talking about the emotional issues and the trauma that precipitate these kinds of occurrences, like the heart attack's the main one. You know, he said that it's one of the traumas he doesn't want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the stress that causes a heart attack, because some of them are obviously fatal. So, like, where do you go after you've faced death like that?
Well, I was very lucky, and I had good surgeons, and got through it okay. And as I mentioned, I'd been in therapy, and I was reflecting on my life, and as you do in therapy, and began to realize that some of the heart attack was of my own making. Not to blame myself, but being ignorant of the relationship between how you think and how you feel, how you interact with people, whether you're positive or negative, what your diet is, and of course your exercise and all of that. And metaphorically realized that in order for me to move forward, I need to reframe the breaking of my heart to becoming open-hearted.
Yes.
And so from that metaphor, then I began to work with I was still doing teaching and training and running workshops, how to integrate sort of mind-body awarenesses, sort of the softer side of things, start using poetry in these very stratified engineering environments to introduce very subtly some different ways of thinking about things without freaking them out.
That's important.
It is. And in fact, one of the things, just to go back to one of the things Carl mentioned in terms of what have been the changes, 15 years ago, when we were working with NASA space flight centers, you know, the NASA group with engineers and scientists and stuff, and we're talking about communicating better and getting more engaged, and we're looking for ways to have heart chakra activities without freaking them out.
Wow.
And so when we would introduce, we wouldn't talk about meditation in those days. It was attention training. So everybody wants to train their attention. But when we mentioned in those days meditation, it went woo-woo, spiritual, 60s, hot tubs, all of that kind of stuff. And so those were the ways that we began to integrate slightly different ways of having people say, oh, I could have a V8. Not you've got to change your life, you know, you've got to, you know, have a transformation, just little tweaks on the way in which you think about things. So that's the way we started integrating the softer side, until I got involved with folks where we were training people to actually integrate those things in workshops. So, but it was more the metaphorical side of opening your heart, and then what grew out of that is what was going on for me.
Fantastic.
Amazing. That's superb. And thank you, Louisa, for asking that. I suppose I was being kind of blokey about it, and you know, sort of, okay, we've done the heart attack bit. Let's fast forward 20 years. But that's a really good question. What did you do personally, and how was that for you? I don't know if you want to say any more about that, Jim, of your personal journey with that.
Yeah, go ahead, Louisa. Yeah. No, that's fine.
I've always got loads of questions. Like when I'm really curious, you know, and tell me to mind my own beeswax if I step on anything. To me, you look like you're actually an open book, and really happy to assist. But you know, what kind of emotions were you going through that when you had your heart attack and you started looking at the metaphysical stuff? You know, what was it that you thought, yes, there it is? You know, like what kind of emotions were kind of adding into the sort of heart load?
That's a good question. And one is scare. I think one of the major one is being scared. And I think, you know, in terms of when I was pushing the envelope at both ends or whatever it was, that I was being driven because I was afraid not to be driven. It's not that I was quivering or shaking. It was a way of being. Just be revved up, keep doing it. Don't, resting is for the weak, you know, that kind of stuff. And naps, I know they're underrated now, but at the time they weren't underrated. They just weren't taken. But anyway, so I think part of that was opening up to the side of realizing that as I began to then do kind of research about it. So I know I'd had the heart attack. I was getting better. I was doing all kinds of things. Then I discovered poetry that spoke to the heart from a different angle. Poetry brings in things from a very different angle of thinking about things and wakes you up in certain ways. And looking for ways in which to take what I'm learning and share it with the people I'm working with. So how do I take an idea and an experience into action that makes a difference with what we're doing with people. So that was the driver for continuing research, how to show up with people, building on my experience to see if I can be helpful.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that was the taking on of looking at poetry, and then the somatic side of things. And my wife teaches yoga, so we're engaged in yoga all the time. And so that mind-body aspect of things got deeper and deeper. And so it's led me to where we are now with our book, and moving to online courses around how you take mind-body learning online and make it as effective online as it could be in a small group, in a circle. So that's
tremendous.
Of course. And then that, I was going to say, that makes complete sense, you know, when you were talking about fear, because you know, the opposite of fear is courage. And of course, it's written in the language like French. Courage.
That's courage, right. And courage, that's right.
So, you know, like, you know, and showing up is courage, isn't it? It's, you know, absolutely like saying, here I am. Whereas like fear is like a self-annihilation, isn't it? It's like, it cuts you down.
It cuts you down.
Yeah.
And I think also for in terms of working with groups of people and everything, when we're in a fearful mode, for whatever reasons, we really can't access very clearly that front part of our brain that lets us think.
Yeah.
It's just not there for us, as you know.
Yeah.
And that's a mirror, isn't it? I mean, because we were also talking, Louisa, Jim and I, about, you know, what happened to human beings, that they shut themselves off or didn't have these aspects available to us for a few hundred years. You know, Jim put a 5,000 year timescale on it, you know, which I understand, and we've had a progress, haven't we, towards the scientific and the rational, which meant a loss of possibly our fullest capabilities, which maybe we're in a revival, rebirth, renaissance of that sort of consciousness and awareness now. And on the one hand, wouldn't that be great? On the other hand, isn't it absolutely necessary that we live according to our full capacity, and that we don't, and we position ourselves in love and courage and not in fear, because we see the difference of the kind of world it creates if we do either of those, just like the plants and the rice and the water. So it's beautiful to bring all of these things together, Jim, and then people are going to be thinking to themselves, well, how do I work with Jim? And we're here we are at Expats Portugal. Here you are. You've had the great news this week that your D7 approval has come through. You're on your way to Portugal. Yeah. And there is a possibility, because Louisa and I have been working with people developing courses, and you very kindly sent us some ideas about what you might do in that department. Mm-hmm. So if I may, if I could just...
it, by the way, I think it's awesome.
It's really good.
Like Carl and I were talking about something similar, but by no means as brilliant as what you've come up with. I mean, that's amazing. Because it is like your idea is something that you know, the reason why something similar came to mind for me was because it's not easy settling in another country.
No.
And finding your feet and being courageous. You know, a lot of people, like Carl and I were marveling, you know, we're back in the same town we were in 4 years ago. And 4 years ago, when we went to a cafe, we felt really embarrassed to order anything because we had no concept of the language, you know, and the culture. And we were kind of excusing ourselves everywhere we went, you know, kind of apologizing for being alive.
First word we learnt, wasn't it, in Portuguese, is sorry, but that's very British. That's very British.
Yeah, we learnt it like a British.
That's right. I mean, you learned it in the van on your way, right? From the
UK. For when I'm going to need it. For when I'm going to need it.
It was literally the first word we used, because we illegally and accidentally went through a péage, like well, not péage. That's what they are in France. What are they called?
Via Verde.
The toll booth. Yeah, so we didn't get the ticket on the way into it, and then on the way out we were charged like around about 100 euros, and that was really our first experience of Portugal, and it was horrific because we just didn't mean to do it and didn't know how to explain it on a...
Couldn't apologize our way out of it either, as you can in Britain. I mean, somebody once said to me, you know, you British are so polite. On London buses, even if a bus isn't operating, it says, sorry, I'm out of service. It's like it's so UK.
Smiley eyes.
Yes. But before we go fully into some of the ideas that you might be bringing, and hopefully people will get access to in Portugal, Jim, from an expat point of view, can we just catch up in the comments here, because people have been chipping in, which is fantastic.
I love that name, Midlife Crisis World Tour.
Who is that? Eusebio. That's
Eusebio.
He knows what British people are like. He's in Southwest London, and he's awesome. And he's a fantastic researcher. Whenever I get interested, like I was in the soap company last week, and then Dr. Bayards as well, he comes up with all his fantastic research because his ancestry is Portuguese. And he's wonderful on that sort of stuff. So shout out and big love to Eusebio, who's here this evening. And we might talk about midlife crises as well, just to honour that name. But Jersey P, we're talking of mental chatter. I'm just wondering what chatter is in Trump's head. It's very scary. I think, whilst that is a comment that can be made about that.
That's a whole show.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? But it's an unfortunate. I don't know. The great thing about that, in a way, is that Trump can take the full blame for the outward expression of a overburdened mental chatter. But we all do it, don't we? That's the thing. We're all up to it. And there, but you could say, I guess, Jersey, there, but for the grace of God go I. That you can understand why people might want a slightly more wise sounding and reserved world leader who doesn't just say the first thing that comes to his head, which is what he appears to do. And now we've got possibly another president. And I always hesitate before going into US politics on any of these shows. No, but it might be that Mr. Biden is the opposite. He looks like he struggles for the chatter to come forth. But let's not go there. Let's not go there right now. We've got these two contrasts of Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden. Let's leave it at that.
But neither of them have their D7 visa. Just remember that.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Jim White for president. You have more brain cells in your stomach. I don't know if Pete has been sending something of mine for analysis. I don't think he's talking to me personally, is he there? You have more brain cells in your stomach.
It sounds to me like a bit of cat racism there. I'm sorry.
Cat racism. There's a new thing. There's a new thing.
Speciesism, whatever it's called.
Well, we're talking about brain cells in your stomach, and et cetera. There are some current, and Peter's probably referring to this, there are some schools of thought in neuroscience that talks about your mind. I mean, if we were to say, where's your mind? Well, where would people point?
Oh, yeah, everyone goes here, don't they?
Exactly. That's right.
Yes,
and really it's about, your mind is about your brain and your heart and your gut. And it's the gut has brain cells to a degree, and so does the gut. I mean, the gut and the heart have brain cells as well. So when you start thinking about where is your mind, it is a whole body experience. Mm-hmm. And being able to pay attention to the sensations that bubble up from the body as it informs what you say is a part of the working with this. How do we show up in a more full way? How do we take care of our emotions and, really understand what's going on within ourselves? And that is so hard. I mean, that is not, as you well know.
And fascinating, right, Jim? Because we all know, I think, that some of our what feel like our heart-based or gut-based decisions are much better than some of the ones that are the rational ones, which we're taught is the supreme faculty.
Exactly.
And it's so often not in retrospect. No. And in many ways, a lot of us, maybe that's what a midlife crisis is where we've gone with consistently with the head, with the brain cells, and overruled the heart and gut brain cells. And then what's the next thing that person does? They get a motorbike to get back in touch with their heartfelt.
Right. You've got a convertible car, an MG4, going down the motorway.
That's right.
With a scarf flying in the background.
Exactly, with any luck. So thank you, Peter, for your assessment there. We'll just leave that there for a minute. Tina is here as well. Hello, Tina. Botard from Luge, 1 month in and loving my next here in Portugal. So it's so great to hear you having a fantastic time, Tina, in Luge and here in Portugal. Tell us more and send pictures in the mornings that we can share of the Algarve. That'd be fantastic. Hello from Bellingham,
Washington.
Yeah, in Washington State. They're fantastic. Winnie too. Oh, Carl, try a condo in Amsterdam with no hot water or central heating. So this is, I was sharing that claim that we're better off than our grandparents. And I don't think Matty's feeling better off than his grandparents.
Maybe not.
I didn't think I was better off. Like when my mum and dad came to visit us in that old hotel that we were staying in, my dad was like quite visibly shaken, and he confided in me that it was worse conditions than he grew up in 1940s England.
He didn't tell me that, thankfully. But he was probably working around my sense of shame or something like that. Pete, I particularly appreciate the contributions made by the invisible woman. Whoops, Louisa, you sat on her, but I hope she's okay. The woman who was sat in your chair previously. Yes, the one who's struggling there now. Hello from Washington, D.C. That's Sue. What, the invisible woman or Sue?
Yeah, who's the invisible woman?
The woman, it was a joke about who was in your chair before you got there.
Oh.
It looked like we had an invisible participant there.
Right, okay.
Another way of looking at your arrival is this. The screen just brightened up. Hi, Mrs. M. So that's not great.
Thank you, Mandy. That's lovely.
And the lyrical and musical genius that is Warren Sharm, who wrote the classics Reunification, and the line, Donata, or is it Donata, Donada? One tastes great and the other doesn't matter. That is genius, Warren.
That's
and I play those whenever I can. So thank you. Please, we're waiting for the other 18 tracks to come of this 20 Golden Grapes collection that we're hoping to share.
Hey, Carl's already written one, actually. He wrote it about 4 years ago. It's called Mr.
Oh, Mr. Tostemista.
Yeah, Mr. Tostemista.
Yeah, Mr. Tostemista, legend. And Mr. McCoyser as well. Mr. McCoyser is another one of my on-screen personalities. Jacqueline's here. Good evening. Hello, Jacqueline. Lovely to see you. I meant Bonoit. Oops. What did she say before? I didn't even realise.
Next.
Oh, she said Botard. It is officially Noit now, but we didn't notice. Nafashmal. For a British woman, it seems to me to be chilly, says MBA. It's 15 degrees right now. Let's have the first week of some autumn rain. Yeah, it is. So you are in Portugal then, and 50. It is getting chilly. It feels damper and colder in the evenings now, doesn't it? So we're very grateful when it's getting over 20 in the day.
It's time to start drying out your homes. Get there.
There she is, a doom monger.
No. I'm being practical. Seriously, get your dehumidifier on now. Yeah, I mean, the Portuguese start lighting their fires around now.
You would be great. Why don't you start walking around town with a shawl on and going up to strangers and saying that? Now's the time to start drying your home.
Midlife I'm busy looking after the family.
You've done it. You did it on a video already. You did it on a video that 100,000 people have seen. Isn't the material condition of people's lives the most important, while not the exclusive factor in achieving peace? I can afford my introspection because my first thought isn't feeding myself. So true, right, Jim?
Yes, yeah. I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Eusebio is a remarkable man. Un abraço Tuga de Villarreal. A Tuga hug there, fantastic. Carlos Ribeiro. I do like the word Tuga, and I was a little bit hesitant to use it because I just thought it might be a bit too familiar and colloquial, and maybe even a little bit rude, and maybe only Portuguese people could call themselves Tugas. But I think it's okay to say that now. Books that changed my life. Angela's Adrienne asked Jim. Okay, Jim.
It's Angela's Arien, Arrien. Angela's Arien, Arrien. She's a Basque anthropologist who grew up in the Pyrenees, and at 12 went into the mountains for a year and saw nobody, and later became a philosopher and an anthropologist in the United States. Very good book.
12 years old, took her off on a retreat.
Yeah, maybe 14. I think they have a walkabout. They go walkabout in that culture. I understand for a spiritual awakening. And you live there. I don't know. I've just read that stuff. So.
Well, we've got the Camino, haven't we? I mean, there is that tradition for sure where people go on that kind of spiritual walkabout. Yeah, but it's quite structured. I mean, that sounds amazing that somebody would do that at that age and that the parents would be fine. But then again, if it's part of the culture, the parents aren't seeing it as some sort of extraordinary and terrifying thing.
Yeah,
and that's we might talk about that as well. We know what's gone missing from our rites of passage in our cultures. But Jim, go on.
I was going to say what she came up with as she was there out in the woods and actually interacted with no one. She saw people in villages, but she became an anthropologist because she tried to figure out what is it that keeps these people united? What unites communities?
Yeah.
And so she would see the Basque community and the French community, and they all have, anyway, she studied that, and that was what she did in the United States. And she wrote a book called The Fourfold Way. And it looks at 5 different cultures and what they have in common with regard to how to live a good life in community.
Yes.
What are the 5 lessons from indigenous cultures about how to live a good life? And
what are they, Jim?
Well, one, it's show up.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be too in the future. Don't be in the past.
Yes.
Tell the truth with no blame or judgment. There's the key.
Oh, my
You
goodness.
can tell the truth, but how do you do that with no blame and judgment? Because blame and judgment brings in a whole different, as you know, different part of your brain, and you're going to go negative when you start getting, okay. Show up, tell the truth without blame or judgment. Pay attention to what has heart and meaning. Pay attention to what has heart and meaning for you and what has heart and meaning for the other people. Connect, in other words. And the openness being open to outcome, not attached to outcome.
Yeah.
So be open, you want to move forward, but don't be too attached. In Buddhism, they would say, expectations will, lead you down a path or whatever. But so be open to outcome, not attached to outcome in the things that you do. Show up, really show up, be present, don't, and then be open to outcome, pay attention, tell the truth, and pay attention to what has heart and meaning. So those are the 4. And they went across 5 indigenous cultures: Aboriginals in Australia, Maoris, the folks in Borneo, Native Americans, and there was one other, so Maoris, and Adivasis in India, the original folks who inhabited India before the wave of Westerners, the Alexander the Greats and the early migration of folks into India. There were native peoples there who were land-based, and so those 5 cultures is what she studied to come up with those 4 ways of living.
And it just sounds so, as to quote Basil Fawlty, it sounds so bleeding obvious, doesn't it? It is just, you can hear that, and well, of course.
Oh, sure.
That's the way to run a society. Yeah. So why then, Jim, would you say it is such an uphill struggle? So I know this is a big question. This is a very big question, isn't it? But why is it that when that is so obvious, and most people who you would talk to in a context like this would say, yeah, of course, that sounds right. Why do we have such trouble implementing or installing that as the software for society?
I have my theories. I think they all really have to. I think there are a lot of hung together around, again, that default mode network we talked about, the brain cells that say, you're worrying about the future, you're worried about the past, you're worried about who likes you, who doesn't like you, if you like them, all of that kind of chatter that we all go on. I think about showing up is about being present, and we are so pulled from presence, whether it's the kids or YouTube or whatever, or work or whatever. So as you know, it's very hard to stay present because it's an integration of your breathing systems and your mind-body systems, and it's very, very difficult to do. But I think that's about, and there's another one, probably fear of missing out, because all of those mechanisms are trying to protect us. I'm worried about the future so something doesn't get at me, and I worry about the past so something I did doesn't come back and bite me. And so it's fear, I think, and showing up, telling the truth. We're very much afraid, this is my, about hurting other people's feelings. So if we tell the truth, the last time we told the truth, it backfired on us. Because let me tell you, I won't say this, how do my hips look in this dress? Now, how do you answer that? Right.
I'm always offended. When I ask that question, people never, I don't want people to be honest when I ask that question.
Exactly. So that's about people telling that being open to outcome, it's about, we really want to think we can control so much, because control is attempting to take care of how we're fearful. So if we control things, our thinking or kind of things that we're doing, and then telling the truth and tell the truth, be open. Being open is about that. Paying attention to what has heart and meaning. Okay, this we all know from this. How many conversations have we been in where we are what we're listening to is not what's being said, but what we're formulating in the back of our minds to respond.
You know me so well.
And me, ask Mandy. Ask Mandy.
That that's the supreme conspiracy theory, and I'm not saying that as a put down. This is to me the greatest of all conspiracies are the ones that we're bringing about ourselves, and that is the fearful self conspiracy there, isn't it? All of those factors constantly at work and undermining us to create a world other than what might be possible. Charles Eisenstein style, the beautiful world we know in our hearts is possible. It doesn't happen, arguably, because of all the reasons you just gave. And those are the things we have agency over. We have to take responsibility for that, don't we? It's not like we can blame anyone else for doing it the way you just said. We are those people. We do think like that. Yeah, amazing.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Can
sorry.
Talking about fear, we've got a comment here from Margaret Katz, and I think it's an interesting talking point, actually. So she's saying fear and courage coexist, and this came in when we were talking about fear before, by the way. So it's fear and courage coexist. You generally don't have courage unless you are facing some level of fear. I don't like fear being labelled a bad emotion. It's a signpost to help us see what's before us.
Great point.
And I would agree with that. I think where we do have fear, it's a bit like the whole polarity mindset. How can we evolve or be sort of living the best life we can unless we have things to reflect on? So I would absolutely endorse that, and I absolutely love what you shared with us about the 4-path system. Being open to outcome, but not too attached. I think one of when Carl was asking, how have we kind of not lived by these 4 rules before? How has it happened? And actually, when I think about the breakdown of family structures, if you're in a good family, you'll be seeing people show up, being truthful about things, even if it hurts, but sticking around to clean the mess. You'll be paying attention to what has heart and meaning. And, when you're living in one of those sort of happy and loving systems, you start learning from each other. It's when we close down to people, that's when we don't become that open to not having our outcomes met. Because there's no way in the world I want to be open to other people's outcomes unless I feel a sort of trust with people. And if that trust isn't there, all of a sudden I'm really not interested in hearing, because I don't think the person that's talking to me will have my best interest at, or the best outcomes, the best interest for everybody,
We have an honest comment tonight from John A. Davis. Now, when you were talking, Jim, just now, I realized that I hadn't given it's not a disclaimer, it's a kind of contextual, it's a positioning statement for Feelgood Portugal.
I've got to go, this baby crying.
Okay, well, I've got something to address here with John. And no hard feelings, John. That's because we can't be talking about people being honest without being, just saying, okay, well, there's John's comment. It's and we assume he's finding it boring, and that is fine because that's your honest share, John. And some would see that as trolling or like a mischief or something like that. And I'm going to take it in exactly the spirit that Jim was talking about, which is just you felt moved to say, I don't know. I'm making it mean that's what you think. All it is 6 Zs as a message, and then we can make a message. We can make a meaning.
We can make it up.
Yeah, but we'll make the rest up. That's right. But what's interesting to me with this is that what we're trying to do here is, and what I would suggest to people is, if they're not finding it interesting, to not watch, and if they find themselves going into the polarity of the mind. I want people to have a good experience of this show. I know what it was, Jim. It was about enjoying things at all levels. And I can honestly say part of my sort of mission, if you like, or how I see the Good Morning Portugal show, is that in some way, wouldn't it be wonderful if people could enjoy that on mind, body, and spirit level? Because it's very easy to do media stuff where you're just in people's minds, stirring them up and triggering them. I think it's a more difficult, but also a more appealing mission to engage people holistically. And I take that on willingly and gladly. And I've no problem with being judged on that basis. That's what really moves me, is to do it like that, is to think, okay, I could just chuck things in to stir people up, which is a lot of how the media is now. Or I could think, well, how can I address people's minds, give them something to think about? How could we talk about the body? And we do, we talk about the importance of health and so on, but sort of spiritually, holistically. So that would have been my honest response. And what I would said last week when we were opening up the show, if this is for you, that's great. If it's not for you, it's really not a good idea to be here. And the last thing I would want is people being frustrated about what's being shared or the way it's being shared, and then being silly enough to stick around and make themselves miserable for 2 hours, not enjoying it. And I think that's a world I'd love to see, where people, it's like scrolling on, isn't it? When you see something on social media that's not for you, there's so much on there you could gravitate towards, or you go to the phrase you used before, Jim, which is where people are just looking for something bad in a way to be triggered by, to respond to. So, John, in many ways, I thank you for that comment there, and I invite you to, either, if you're not enjoying it, there's really no, you're not compelled to be here, but also to contribute in a way that, well, how might we wake you up?
Yeah. One of the things that, I know you asked the question, but I wanted to come into something that you mentioned earlier, in terms of your mission to do something.
Yeah.
What if we connected on each other's mission? What if if we were ever to do a longer course, we could do something like this, but ask people here, what's your mission? What's your promise to life? Why are you here?
Yes.
Why do you think you're here? What is the story you're telling about yourself that says, I'm here and this is what I'm doing? When you connect with that mission, and it's hard to find sometimes what your mission is and get clear on it, and it will change. But when we get to that mission statement, it's called a sankalpa in Sanskrit.
Okay.
And then we can relate to that. You can come back and go back to that. Am I living into my mission? Is what I'm doing now living into my mission, or what? And if not, why not? Not to make you feel badly, just to give you the perspective to say, maybe, just maybe, there's another way for me to think about this, because I'm not living into my mission right now.
Yes. Yeah, thanks, Jim. That's great. And thank you, Mandy, to go right back to what sparked that conversation. Superb. That sounds so wonderful. The book, the woman who wrote the book, fantastic. Thank you, Mandy, for that. Not much of a reader, talking of books anymore, but watched Kiss the Ground and Fantastic Fungi recently that are great. They're Netflix documentaries, of course, and they're both, I agree, Matty, they're superb, aren't they? Jackie's here. Jackie in the room. We should live from our heart. Yeah, thanks, Jackie, for that. Mrs. M, I think they also tried the poo transplant to improve allergies, I think. There you go. I wonder what happened. Everyone should be tested for your microbiome. I think, John S., it may well come in time. As Jim, I'm sure, knows, as a follower of research, it perhaps will come, Jim, right? Testing at that level.
That the thing about some of these ideas that seem like they're kind of strange and odd is that wait a few years until they go into the mainstream. So, I mean, it really is, there's so much going on that is, taking sort of the fringe ways of thinking about things and integrating them into science as a way of validating, and there are other ways to validate as well. So, things are changing.
Yeah, Eusebio, midlife crisis. If you've read The Spirit Level, you know that their premise is that the equal societies are healthier societies. Yeah, and that certainly at a gut level and heart level, we can see that, can't we? And then argue about it at other levels. Hi, Jim from Diane.
Hi, Diane. How are you? We're going to talk soon about Portugal. Look forward to it.
Very good. It's a self-defense mechanism in our body. If you're in fear of the tiger, you should not be able to solve complex mathematical equations. You should run or hide. So
good
true.
Thought. Good idea.
Well, as you know, some of you may know, I was chased by wild boar, or that's how I framed the story, and I wasn't thinking about complex mathematical equations. I could attest to that. I absolutely listen to my body. Goosebumps and a tightening tummy tell me so much, Cindy B. And it is, you know, wouldn't that be a great thing to be taught and to have that supported rather than it being some sort of occult practice, which is, in many ways it is, isn't it? And there's the lovely comment. Thank you, Margaret, for that. Joao F is here in the evening as well. Good evening, everyone. Just joined in. What a Zen atmosphere. Well, cheers, Joao. I hope you enjoyed it. Jeff Jackson, boa noite, alegria, todos. Yes, a bon dia, alegria. Works a little bit better than boa noite, alegria, doesn't it? What rhymes with noite that we might put in place there? Makes you laugh. Makes you tough. Not makes you laugh. Makes you tough, Matty. We were waiting after 12 years for our landlord to fit central heating and double glazing. Didn't do them any harm. They lived in a hole in the ground. They had to get up before they went to bed. Carl, the word tuga comes from the word Portugal, which is a local form of saying Portuguese. Thank you for that, Joao, for that clarification. Good to know. Life-changing books, anything by Paulo Coelho for Cindy B. Yep. Thanks for sharing that from Matty. I did not know that. Thanks for sharing. John's comment, I think we have covered. Carl, the word tuga. Okay, yep. Thank you for that, Joao F. And if you don't want an honest, truthful answer, don't ask the question. I'm going to ask you about Brad Blanton in a minute, Jim. Bonoit, this is great. Keep up the great work. Cheers, Joe. Life-influencing book from Jean, Spontaneous Healing. Oh, Dr. Andrew. Is that Vile or Weil? Explores the connection between mind, body, and nutrition. Andrew Weil. Yeah, lovely. He seems like such a lovely man. Warren Sharm, to know what I deeply think, I flip a coin. It's that instant unconscious reaction of yes or no to the side that comes up. That, and I think he's going to carry on. Oh, that makes the truth be revealed. Thank you, Warren, for that. Sleep is good and needed by everyone, needed every day to recharge. Maybe John has insomnia and can sleep now. Thank you, Matty. And you were saying before, Jim, about the cult of tough and getting up early, working late, all of that sort of stuff. What was that all about, do you think?
Oh, I think like so many of us in North America, probably Europe as well, that we can be driven to accomplish things, and that there are hierarchies that we need to go on. We're programmed in our societies to achieve, show up with as much money as we possibly can, work extra. The badge of honor is that I have 10 days of overtime and I haven't taken it and I'm not going to take it, or I have 10 days of vacation and I'm not going to take it because I can work hard and do this. And it's a whole ethic in a way of that we're brought up, that success and achievement has to do with behaving in certain ways, particularly in organizational structures. And it just becomes a part of us. It's the water that we swim in, and we don't even notice it until all of a sudden something happens for some of us that wake you up and sort of say, wow. First of all, it wakes you up and say, what happened? And then eventually maybe, like they say, I could have had a V8. So how do I, the saying, I don't know if that's translates cross-cultural. Anyway, I could have had a choice about things. So now let's make the choice. So.
Yes. And part of the reasoning behind so many people, I think, moving to Portugal, I saw a lovely meme the other day. It said something like, Portuguese out of office replies, or Southern Europe, it's August, I'll be back in September. American out of office, I'm having kidney surgery today, but I am available on my cell phone.
That's it. That's right.
it,
I was
right
being
there.
available for my cell phone and had the heart attack.
Yes.
That's what it was.
Incredible, huh? A. Dudley, or G.A. Dudley's The Realization System in Practical Psychology was a pivotal course book. I was quite vain and naive when I was younger. Taught me a lot. Weren't we all, though,
Weren't we all?
Fiona and Simon? I found that Eric Fromm really helped me to have or to be, or The Art of Loving. Great books by Eric Fromm. I think he deserved a bigger audience. John may have collapsed on the keyboard. Oh, I'm in trouble here as well. How come you didn't stream? I see. I get a choice of 8 channels to stream to, and yes. Could you do me a big favor to help me out, everybody here? Feelgood Astrology, and I do. You've heard me taking the proverbial about how few subscribers Louisa has, and compared to what's happening. I'm so grateful to everybody who subscribed to Expats Portugal, but Louisa is upset there because I didn't stream to her channel, and thereby perhaps not getting us some more subscribers. So, love, please put your link in so everyone can make sure they're subscribed to you, and that might help me out a little bit so I'm not in so much trouble. As Sartre once said, haters gonna hate. I think he did say that.
That's right.
Or it might have been Socrates. Was on that before, but chat was dead there, so I switched to Expats Portugal. Oh, I see. So yes, you only get to see the platform you're on, whereas I get to see everything here. That's interesting. Okay, I never saw it from that point of view. Mark Tiberi, I listened to my gut. It was in place long before our brains, and I still find something. Okay, yes, I think there's a little bit of that comment missing there. Oh, John S is back. I wasn't trolling. It's very important what you were. Okay, John, fair enough. Sorry. And as I said, it was only 6 Zs. And of course, we're meaning-making machines. I took it a certain way and then went off on one about that. And that's what we're doing all the time, isn't it? And I would agree with you entirely, John. Thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate it. Noit Shoit. I don't think we're going to be using that. Thank you very much. True. And that is Mrs. M herself. You think, okay, and someone.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No. True, Fiona and Nigel. I do feel my body adapts to the cold. I think that's Fiona and Simon, though, isn't it? I did see a news article about the increase in Europe's wild boar population shortly after your incident. Didn't mention Portugal. No, but what's the name? Shakira. Shakira got chased in Spain. Apparently, a wild boar took her handbag, which that's harder to believe than my story, I think. Finding it making better decisions in my brain. Okay, yeah, back to the gut with Mark Tiberi there. And if you're not going to believe the answer anyway, yeah, don't give them the satisfaction of asking the question in the first place. Fair point. So you coming to Portugal, Jim, the ideas that you shared with us that we both thought were great, how your work is transferable to the context of the newly arrived expat and what it might be that is available to people from you. So could you tell us a little bit about that, the expat experience and the Jim White effect and influence on that?
Well, thank you. These are ideas, and they're just ideas, and we're just unearthing them now. It hasn't turned into a plan or anything. Coral asked a couple of weeks ago if folks were interested in taking ideas they have and turning them to a course, and I came forward and said there may be some ideas that would be welcome here, and I don't know because but I wanted to float them. And I said there is a phenomenon called culture shock, and you've all heard about culture shock. And culture shock is about the phases that people go through when they go from one culture to another culture. And many times, and I don't know that this is a prevalent thing in the Portuguese community because it is so upbeat, and we're so upbeat about what we love. This dynamic of being shocked by what's going on in the culture may not be a big issue here. However, one of the things that we do, but the idea was to explore that, and I'll give you a background, but what we know is that with regard to the reactions to another culture that go from sort of the immediate reaction of just not liking it and they don't show up to chronic perspectives on the culture and the people themselves that then get shared in groups becomes contagious. So is there are there folks who are coming to Portugal who are wanting to look for ways to positively adapt and adjust and integrate and as far as they want, that would like to have conversations about that. Because there are things that we can do that are practices that we can engage in when we start looking at things cross-culturally. Yeah. And just a bit of background, because the Expats Portugal and a lot of the things on Facebook already meet these kinds of needs. But just to go back about many years ago, the whole idea of culture shock got started when a young Peace Corps volunteer wrote a postcard in Nigeria, and she was criticizing the country, and it was in the post office and was looked at there, and it created an incredible controversy around adapting to another culture, being positive, looking for ways to integrate into the culture, looking for ways to be of service. And the whole field of cross-cultural training and education grew up out of that postcard and began to be applied with State Department and a lot of international organizations. Now, long story short, when I was in the Peace Corps, we had volunteers that we would, the volunteers would go to a country, and this is India specific, they would go to a country and they would have been in 3 months of training, cross-cultural studies, area studies, language, etc. Then they get to the country and they have a 2-year stint. 3 to 6 months in, 40% would go home. And the investment of money in that was one, but what about the pain and suffering of those folks who went home because they didn't think they could cut it? And that was all put in that framework of culture shock. And then there were things that happened, the Peace Corps did and others have done. I just read some research today on what you're doing in the nursing community around burnout. But there were things that you could do to help ameliorate. I never can pronounce that word, but anyway.
Lovely word.
Amelia Earhart ate or whatever. Just calm it down. There are things that the Peace Corps did and that others do to help people adapt to the new way of being. And the overall aspect of that is what we were trying to do was, yes, save money, and yes, save people's face, etc. But on a broader level, we were looking at relieving suffering. How do we relieve the potential suffering of these young people, very young at the time, in these cultures who are really angry, they are lashing out, they're getting drunk and doing strange things in squares, and plazas. And how do we take care of that? So anyway, there's a whole science and an art and a science to it. So long story short, there are things you can do if people wanted to talk about challenges and issues that people are having adjusting to the culture that have to do with emotional management. Yeah. And that we could create a place to have that kind of conversation.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's really important. Yeah, and that's why Louisa and I are very grateful and very interested in what you were suggesting. I did an interview with a woman called Deborah Dahab, who and she's in Portugal, and she talked to me, and I think she helps expats, especially with some of those immigrants, whichever word you'd want to use, but people in a new country who are struggling. And I think there are a few aspects here. One of them is that sometimes people don't want to go there. It's like, this is the big dream. So to even be talking about the difficulties that there might be around it would be almost betraying my dream. Exactly. to have any negative aspects to it. So it's one thing, isn't it? I mean, the young people you talked about, there's a sense of a kind of, not a conscription exactly, but a service, a national service, a volunteer service that has a slightly different tone to it than the voluntary move when you're retiring and you want to go to a new country.
Exactly.
And in that context, you can really understand some of the things that they were going through. And what is it about public squares? But anyway, that's another. That's another. Yes. But with the expat, you get here, and I'm so guilty of this. I'm part of the process of excitement and positivity, of moving ever closer to being in this wonderful country, which it is. But it's not going to be without its challenges or problems, and we do need to talk about those, I think. And there, the great phrase that I think is so true for immigrants, expats, people who move to new countries, like wherever you go, there you are.
There you are.
Right.
Exactly.
And any issue that you've got that you've you thought might be dealt with by moving country might be dealt with by moving country, but it might not.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. When you move to another country, parts of yourself emerge that you didn't know exist, or can emerge that you didn't know exist.
Yes.
And you've either thought you put them down or they weren't there in the first place. Exactly.
And we've faced those, haven't we? Mrs. M is back, and she'll tell you that, you know, this, as far from being, oh, you know, we're in gin and tonic drinking, you know, nirvana. This is in many ways as enjoyable and wonderful as my work and life is. It's been a very tough 4 years as well for other reasons, isn't it, Mrs. M?
Yes, it is a big transition for sure. I mean, I've lived in a few different countries, and I think it's a lot easier to adapt when you've got lots of time on your hands to do it. Like we've hit the ground running, needing to run our businesses and look after our kids, and so we haven't had as much time to integrate as, you know, as I integrated loads, you know, when I was in my 20s living in France, or when I was swanning around in Indonesia, you know, without a care in the world. It's much easier. So there's lots of different things to consider. Yeah, and it changes your like idea on who you are, and then with what's going on like around the world right now, there's a lot of expat guilt going on. You know, like you might be facing the thought that you might never see a family member in another country ever again, and it's you know, not trying to put a downer on the evening.
No.
They're really deep questions, and you don't think of that when you're moving out necessarily, but when you get here, the reality, you know, and like, how do you spend Christmas? And in fact, like, the truth is, you experience these kinds of things every year, even in your own country. But when you're in a foreign country, it feels like it's the fact that you're away from your
very
kid.
good point. Yep.
And you put it down to being in another country, but it actually happens where you are anyway. But the guilt is a huge thing.
It is. And one of the things, if we were doing we had a group of people and we were having this kind of conversation with a group of people, so let's learn from each other. So we've all been through this, you know, we've had to let go of things. We're in this transitional place, and there's some new things happening for us. So what have you done? What do you do now when these kinds of feelings come up, in order to work with those? And what are some good practices that we have that help us come to grips with the fact that, you know, I never liked Christmas in the US, and now it's Christmas here, and I miss it so much, and we're all these uncles that smoke cigars at the table, and it's so wonderful. So
you've got a lot more balls, haven't you? You've got like because I work with quite a few American clients, and you know, like in the Brits, we really worry about really is Christmas and possibly Halloween if we've got children. But like you guys have also got Thanksgiving's a massive one, and the 4th of July as well. When some of my customers are actually thinking ahead for like the next like 4 months, and they're like, and there's New Year, and it's a huge thing. Like, who do I spend my time with?
We've got some comments. Sorry, Jim, go on.
No, go ahead.
We got a couple of comments. Going back to culture shock, Jean has that as a book from high school, if I recall, a long time ago. Says Jean, "Wild pigs don't lie." That's the Shakira.
That's
Shakira.
So funny.
Very good. They don't mess about. They give you an honest answer, don't they? I mean, this is what we were talking about, of course, with Robert last week, is being more coming from our animal instinct. And this is all connected, isn't it? It's all connected. The human being is so rational and so thoughtful, and with all these layers of complication. We're not like a straight up wild boar who you know where you stand with a wild boar, which is probably quite far away. Hi, I am currently living in Germany. Would like to know where I can get more information and guidelines to open a business in Portugal. Mazamal Kudush, I would say go to our forum. People there who will have started businesses, and the incubator scene. If you're doing something that might be of interest, that's innovative and new and interesting to a university, all the Portuguese universities, it would seem, have an incubator department where all the entrepreneurs and startups go. So it is a good scene here. Warren says, still with us, thankfully. Thanks for persisting, because we're an hour and 42 into the show, and I didn't check with you, Jim. how long you were expecting to
I'm
be
good.
here, but
No,
you're good.
no
Okay,
worries.
fine. Okay, I was born in India, but I'm Caucasian. Moved to Canada for grade 10. It was Indian. I was Indian at my core. Fascinating. It took me 10 years to acclimate. So there you go. That's the sort of thing we're talking about. And you know, I don't know, Warren. Did you
It's
have to?
identity, isn't it? That sounds like you know, like our eldest that we have together. You know, he was in England until he was 5, and his whole identity was, you know, about being in this tiny little kind of almost village setting where everybody knew him. This little English kid, and our other two are really very not Portuguese, but they just don't have the same kind of identity as our eldest. Identity is a huge thing, isn't it?
It is, and challenges too.
You did pronounce ameliorate. I think it's a great word as well. I love that.
Beautiful.
So just reading our unit. It's a fantastic word.
Connected to mellifluous, of course, as well, and mel being honey, doesn't it, to make things sweeter? Absolutely beautiful.
It's a really great word.
Jim, there's another thing here. You know,
I love effulgent. It just sounds really kind of generous.
Okay, all right. Therapy and talking about feelings. Another thing that perhaps in the last few decades has become a little bit more acceptable, doable. And perhaps we could do therapy a service tonight, because I know there are people who don't want to go there. And I would suggest that in terms of, you know, wherever you go, there you are. If you're going to just stiff up a lip or deny the difficulties that come when you're moving country, well, I mean, just in life generally, it's going to get you in the end, isn't it?
It's going to get you in the end.
So for those people, Jim, who think, you know, the very word, a bit like spiritual, the very word therapy, you know, a lot of people, you know, like navel gazing stuff. I don't want to talk about my feelings. You know, if I wanted to talk about my feelings, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Get a teddy bear or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yes. So do you think that's changing? And how would you dare people or support people to get in touch with a side of themselves that they don't feel comfortable going to? And what's the advantages? Do you see it? Because you must see these breakthroughs with people, like, you know, very regularly.
You do see them, and I think the folks that I work with are at midlife and mid-career and mid-level, making transitions and want to change their work, like midlife crisis probably is, and we all are at different points.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't. This isn't just an opinion. I don't think it's possible to force people into seeing something that they don't want to see.
Yeah.
I do think it is, if you get in conversation, is to offer the opportunity. No, without being pushy, it's there with people who don't want to look at it. I don't know that you can do a lot to push people into sort of saying, oh, now I'm going to do this. My life has changed. I'm transformed. I'm a better person. Or I'm happier now when I get the pasta nata than I was before when they would bring it late, or whatever the rub is.
Yeah.
But I do think that you can educate people to the possibility that change is possible, and that there are actually predictable cycles that you will go through or could go through when you move to another culture, if it's a problem for you. And for many folks, it's not a problem. It's a wonderful place, and I don't mind waiting at CEF. It's cool. Be Portuguese about it. God bless you all who can do that, you know. But sometimes being Portuguese about it is an internal journey. It's an inward journey, I think. And then I think it's a kind of like planting seeds. You know, you let people know it's possible, that there are people who are doing, you know, going through the same kind of thing that you are, and they can be of help to you. I mean, there's an incredible power of a community talking about how they solve problems and share them. I mean, you all do such an incredible service, and I was saying earlier before the show, of relieving suffering. You're providing information and connection and possibilities for folks when they come here, excited that when they run into the inevitable rubs of things, they've got a place to go to say, call Carl, call Louisa, let's check into, you know, the Facebook pages and all of the files in the Facebook pages. So there's help.
Yes.
So part of it is just recognizing that it may happen. If it does happen, it's a cycle. If it does happen, there's help for you if you want it, and that help happens to be places to have conversations that are intended to help relieve the suffering of not just the person who's we're talking to, but everybody in the room.
Yes.
It's about a collective way of helping each other figure out a way of showing up as fully as we can in this new life that we have, without getting in our own way sometimes.
That's amazing, because that's really important to me, and there is a balance to it, and you never really know if you've got it right. But
no, you don't.
Because the phrase "showing up" has come up a lot tonight,
Mm-hmm.
and my least favorite kinds of expats don't show up. They've come. It's almost colonial. They've come to enjoy their own life in better surroundings, and okay, fair enough. That's a possibility. That's doable. This country certainly affords that to people. And to me, I think it's a shame in a way that not that I'm not shaming them, but I think they miss out if they don't show up. And I think it's a limitation, and it costs people. It's quite hard work to not show up as well, isn't it, in a strange sort of way? And everyone's got something to give and something useful. And I think I was going to ask you about symptoms, because another way of approaching this, why people might find it useful to talk, is looking at the symptoms of not doing it. So I think you mentioned this. Some expats get angry and bitter, don't they, about the new place? And there's a sign. That's a sign, isn't it, that maybe it would be good to talk.
It is. I think that's one of the signs is when kind of a legitimate not liking something that happens. I don't like it when I have to wait at SEF. Nobody likes that. They don't want to wait in the public hospitals. They don't want to do that. However, that's a transitory thing.
Yeah.
It's when that becomes chronic, and when your worldview is about, well, the Portuguese never show up on time, and they eat too much meat anyway, and what's this thing with eggs anyway, and everything, and then you find a friend, right, at the cafe, and you're sitting there having your pastinada or whatever, and you're talking about how terrible it is, and all of a sudden your friend is saying, yeah, they are bad, they're terrible, they never, and you create this momentum, this whirlpool of negativity that is contagious. And to be honest, and we know that when that is going on inside of us about other people, it is going on inside of us about ourselves, and it's not healthy.
Well said, Jim.
It's not healthy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the symptoms, is a chronic negativity. Now, some people come with chronic negativity before they go anywhere. They bring it with them no matter where they go. I mean, we all know people that no matter what is said, there's something wrong with it, or they got to correct it. We all know people, and the therapists say, and all of the spiritual traditions say, get out of their way. Don't even be around them anymore. Just don't go there. Stay away from them.
Yes.
But so there is a kind of chronic negativity. Another symptom, and Louisa pointed to it as well, is this transitioning to new cultures is about identity. And it could be a double whammy for us that are older. So we're transitioning out of above midlife, later career or whatever. We're going to a new country. The jobs we had went away during COVID. We love working on the internet and engaging, but what are we going to do here? And then you realize that a lot of your identity back there had to do with showing up in classrooms and running workshops and all of that kind, and it's not there anymore. And so what are you going to do? And there's a void there. And in that void, there are things that one can do in the void to help with dealing with the void as well.
Yes.
And so what we're, talking about the possibility of having chats with folks who really want to talk about what are the dynamics that are at play in all cultural change, all change of any sort go through predictable patterns that you can discern. And once you understand the discernment that you're in that place, there are things that it points to that you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree with everything you said there, Jim. And the way you articulate it is just absolutely spot on. There's something very respectful about the way you talk, and
Thank you.
I just love it. You've got a really nice way with words. What you're describing there sounds to me a little bit like the grief cycle, that, the 5 stages of grief, or there's probably more stages than that, in fact. But, when people are recruiting other people to be angry with them, that to me, I was thinking, that sounds a bit like grief, where, all the sort of, when you're in that place of disbelief, that you're trying, denial. Yeah. Because they are real, like, sort of stages, as your identity's changing. And you're right, people seem to come here at a particular stage in their life as well. I mean, the way actually Carl and I came over was kind of shocking, because although we'd always planned to move out, we'd always put it into the future, and then all of a sudden our move came on the back of a redundancy. And so there were so many different feelings, like, caught up with that. And so you come out, and then you're dealing with being in a new place, and it's like, how do I think about everything? All of our feelings that we had in our life in England kind of got transposed into Portugal. Or, for me, because I hadn't had chance to even process it. And Carl, you're actually quite quick to let go of things, I think, aren't you, Carl? You're pretty robust, I think. But for me, it takes me a little while to catch up.
I think there's always a downside to everything. Everything's a balance, isn't it? So my apparent easiness about letting things go will have a shortcoming of some sort, and that's my work to understand, isn't it? And it's probably less. It's probably more normal to be angry about being made redundant. But I thought it was a bloody relief. I was so glad.
It's always there's 2 edges to things.
Yeah.
That's right. No, normally I would leave somewhere quickly without money. And these people are asking me to leave quickly, and they're giving me some money to do it. I was like, yay!
Fantastic. I won the lotto.
Yes, that's right. But therein lies a hastiness, and there's something I've learned being here, that there is a shortcoming to that, and then it is to be a bit more detailed and a bit more considerate and a bit more thoughtful about things. So we've approached it, from both sides, I suppose, which is quite useful.
I mean, we do approach things really, really fast, don't we? I mean, a lot of the people that are watching Good Morning Portugal are really meticulously planning. I think many would be shocked if they knew the speed that we worked at, and just go, "Oh, let's give it a go."
Yeah, and I suppose it's my vicarious way of being more thoughtful, is to help others to do it, maybe.
Yeah, but
you touched on a whole show on that very kind of thing, is in terms of what you do when you're crossing cultures. And it comes, as you know, from all spiritual traditions have a service dimension to them, in terms of being satisfactory at a much deeper level than one might think. And
amazing. Okay, a few more comments then before we say goodbye this evening. Jim, thank you so much for being here. Talking about therapy, this is actually pain therapy, because there is, of course, pain therapy. But in pain therapy, sometimes emotions get released when the pain muscles get solved.
Yes.
That emotional release is often stronger if the individual has lived with the physical pain for years. I'm sure that must be extraordinary. If you bring relief to people, Matty, after years of pain, I guess there's a whole load of other stuff to deal with as well as their relief. Oberg's 4 phases. I don't know what that is. Do you recognize that, Jim?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's about the cultural shock curve, which is honeymoon, and then you go into a dip, and then you come out of the dip, and then things normalize. And it's actually the same as the grief cycle, cultural shock curve. If you know about the hero's journey in terms of that cycle, these are cycles within cycles that go back into nature, as well as what's going on in our minds. But Oberg is the 4 phases of the honeymoon. I think conflict, the resolution begins to be around making friends and contacts, which you all do for the Expat Portugal. You provide a place for people to make contact, which is a healing thing that you do, and then it moves into an adaptation to it. So there are a number of them.
And M. Scott Peck's community building is similar as well, isn't it?
It is.
The politeness at the beginning. Yeah.
Oh, I was
no, it's true. Norming, storming, and forming.
forming.
Yeah, absolutely. we're so predictable. Margaret, I completely agree, says Joao. If you don't fear, you don't need courage to overcome that fear. Therefore, your courage has to be proportionate to your fears. Thank you, Joao. And Warren, having people to go to when we're afraid to understand our foreign experience. So that is what we're talking about, Warren.
Exactly.
Yeah, fear is worse if we feel it alone, isn't it? Or we feel alone. Thank you, Warren, for that observation. On the other hand, fearing what comes. And actually, Warren, given your experience, and that sounded like a very sort of personal process that you went through and struggled with. You may well be an asset to this idea that's in development. On the other hand, fearing what comes ahead is often related to the expectations one builds for the future. Aging has taught me to do my best, not to expect much, except what comes, and act accordingly. Age does bring some good things there.
That's right.
I think one of the most.
If you can just remember what they were, that's the thing.
Well, I was going to add that when Louisa was talking about your style, Jim. When people are concerned about therapy, if there's going to be some work with Jim, I don't think he's going to get everyone lying on a sofa.
Oh gosh, no!
Like a German psychotherapist and say,
no.
So tell me about your relationship with your mother.
With your mother.
That's right. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be
no mothers allowed.
It's going to be a giggle. It's going to be a giggle. I think one of the most important things that we in this and other groups are doing is building community. This helps me so much with that culture. Cindy B, you're a leading light with that as well. And we appreciate you for that, honestly.
It really is.
Sometimes you can discover new parts of your identity when you move to a new place.
Right, exactly.
Which you did, didn't you? When you were swanning about in Bali like bloody Julia Roberts, you found some other aspects of yourself.
Yes, I did. That's when I outed myself as an intuitive coach and not just
very good
a business coach. And that was a huge step for me because I always felt really uncomfortable. A reason I think I went into coaching, like business coach, was because I was working with people and helping people, but it looked acceptable, and I was appreciated by my parents for it. They used to sort of like brag about me and stuff. And the moment I outed myself as an intuitive coach, I think they stopped talking about my achievements because it was a source of embarrassment to them, and the fact that I trained as an astrologer, I did that in my 20s, but not many people know that because my parents, don't have pictures of me on the wall, or, parents might have pictures on the wall of their kids, on their graduation. It's like,
picture off. Where's Louisa? I don't know where she went.
They do have pictures of me now.
Oh, that's good.
When I met with her, they had those multiple photo frames with they've got little holes cut in them for little, you could put multiple photographs in. There was an empty one waiting for photographs, wasn't there, when we met? Am I right?
You are. Yeah. Their dining room wall had a few of these photos dedicated to my sister and her family, and they had like an empty one for me because I hadn't yet got married or had kids.
You filled it up. I made sure that got filled up. I made sure it got filled up quickly.
Yeah, we really did.
I wanted to say something to Gloria and Paul, who are now in Oaxaca, are friends of ours from Baltimore.
Wow.
12 or 15 years ago. They went from here 12 years ago to Costa Rica. And they actually had a business called Retire for Less in Costa Rica. So we were there for 10 years in Costa Rica, and now they moved to Oaxaca. And they've been an inspiration to us for our move to Portugal. And glad you're here, Gloria.
Well, we should, Gloria, if you want to talk, it sounds like you'd be a fantastic person to speak with. Share experiences with.
And we were touched on there, didn't we, the reinvention? Because it's not all bad, is it? I mean, we're looking at some extra sort of juice capacity, something we might not be thinking about, and that it might be good to talk about and think about. But there is a wonderful capacity or space, context for reinventing yourself when you move as well, which is a lovely thing to be doing.
Absolutely. It's an energetic thing, I think, that takes on. It opens up these possibilities. COVID did this for us when we realized for lots of different reasons that we didn't need to be plugged into the system here because our work was going online and all of that. And you say, gosh, we could have, there are other things we could be doing. So it opened up the possibility to dream. And thanks to you all, you give us specifics to dream about. Yeah. And you fill in the blanks. So we can imagine to a degree what it's like, which has been a pull. So we're not being pushed out. We're letting ourselves be pulled by it. And that is so magic.
Great. Joao to Cindy, you bet. I assure you that you are not alone. Fabulous. Cindy B, thank you, Joao, for that. When I moved to Mexico, says Eric, great to see you tonight, Eric. I was afraid to make mistakes with the language, etc., and the culture. But once I accepted that every person will make a mistake, silly errors, etc., it will become easier. Yeah. I guess the same. It will. I guess the same will happen when we move to Portugal. And even Portuguese people struggle with the language, Eric. Remember that. Always remember that. That's funny, Jim. I just can't remember what we were talking about. That was the line of the evening.
I think it was really good, but I don't remember. Right?
Yes. Moving abroad. Well, yeah, because it's along those lines, isn't it? I think it's an entertainment saying. Is people won't. It's the same in training, I suspect. People won't remember what you said. They will remember how you made them feel.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, designing an experience rather than a learning, a training. And yes, that's true. That's very
true. It really does make your character stronger. I really think it changes your vision, when you live in another culture, or many cultures. Each place you go to, your eyes open to something completely new. It's really beautiful. I love that.
What a great note to end on. So yeah, moving abroad will make your character stronger, much stronger in my experience. And look who's here, just as we're about to finish, calling us kids. Well, no, kids, we'll take that. We'll take that tonight. Thank you very much, Victoria. Jim, thank you so much for being with us. Two whole hours. You're a legend. That was an epic performance.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
When are you coming over, Jim?
We're not sure.
Can we do this in person?
Sometime we will. I would love to. We would love to. Sometime end of November, probably, depending on the sale of the house and all of those kinds of things. So we're on our way.
All right. Well, love to you, Jim, and to Mandy.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, do send our love and best to Mandy, and thanks to everybody tonight who's tuned in and contributed.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Jim. We'll see you soon.
See you soon. See you Monday.
Okay. Bye for now, everybody. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.